as compromise in 11th grade or 8th grade or whenever you had early American history. And for me to teach about this it's a little bit painful to discuss somebody losing 3/5 of their humanity as a human being. But that's what this country did in order to form a new government. And as I was telling the class yesterday, I mean, we can criticize people. San Francisco just decided to rename 40 different public schools in their city because they were named after people like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And the reasoning they gave was that some of the Native American agreements that were signed under Lincoln were unfair. So obviously the founding of this country in academia in some ways is under assault, okay? And I think it's fair to criticize these men for compromising on this issue of slavery at this point in time. You just have to realize that if we didn't compromise, we wouldn't have a new constitution. You needed 9 of the 13 states to agree to this new constitution. And you weren't going to get that because more than 4 of the states were slaveholding states. And what they felt was necessary for their economic livelihood, they were not going to go away from that. Okay. So is it fair to criticize the founders here? Yeah, absolutely. But you have to do it in the context of the time period and what was at stake here. If we don't compromise on this issue, there's no U.S. Constitution. We're still living under the Articles of Confederation, which was a miserable failure to this point. Okay. So, as I mentioned, one of the good things they did do is they stopped the importation of new slaves after 1808. And then they said they could not place taxes or tariffs on exported goods, which is good. That's in the Constitution, because if it exists, Congress wants to tax it. They can't tax our exports, okay? Even though, that doesn't really make sense to do that anyways, okay? So the fact that we did not bring in children as slaves, okay? So if somebody was brought in at 20 years old in 1808, when the Civil War ended in 1866, if you were 20 when you were brought in, you would be about 80 years old, 78 years old. Okay, life expectancy for white people was, in your low to mid 40s at that point. Most slaves did not live to the age of 70. Okay, so the fact is, when the Civil War was over, the vast majority of slaves that were in this country were born in this country. Okay, they were not born in Africa; they were born here. Okay, so that's going to play a role after the Civil War and the 14th Amendment, which is going to give former slaves citizenship. Okay, and 14th Amendment talks about, if you recall, all people that are born here or naturalized into this country are citizens of this country. Okay, so that's just helpful information to have. Okay, so this 3/5. So the southern states that have slavery will be able to count for every 5 slaves. They'll be able to count 3 as population, which will give them more representation in the House of Representatives. Okay. They will also have to pay taxes. If you guys saw the lecture yesterday, I talked about the 16th Amendment and the 17th. Okay, the 16th is the income tax. So before the 16th Amendment, the federal government would tax the states based on their population. Okay, and the 17th Amendment was the direct election of senators, where under the Great Compromise, if you'll recall, under the Great Compromise, stop that, okay, the senators were elected by state legislatures, and the 17th Amendment changed that, okay? So based on their population, they will pay taxes as well and get representation in the House of Representatives, okay? All right, so other compromises and other things to work on here. How are we going to elect the president? Okay, that's a big question here. And some of the delegates, remember there's 55 delegates, some of them wanted the people to choose the president. And some said, we don't really trust the people to do that. Some people wanted Congress to elect the president, which would be a parliamentary system. And so they debated this. And they decided to use what's called the Electoral College. The number of electors would match the total number of members of Congress in each state. Okay, why did they do this? Okay, instead of just letting the people do it or Congress do it. Well, it's a compromise between two systems, all right? If you look at everything that we've talked about thus far, the big debates are between state power, okay, the state itself, not just the people in the state, but the state. The power of the states and the power of the people and the power of the national government. Okay, so you've got competing interests here. You got the national government, you got state government. And this Constitution is going to give more power to the national government for sure. And the states are afraid to lose this power. Okay, and this is why they went with the Electoral College. Okay, so if you look at that map up there, okay, and you look at Kansas, Kansas has 6 electors. Okay, so this is an Electoral College map. Now I'll get an updated one of these for 2022, okay, or 2024, because after the census, some states are going to lose population and some states are going to gain population, yes? So they will take those 435 seats in the House and reapportion them, split them back up between the states. Now, if you look up here, guys, like see this number 2, -2? So in the decade between 2000 and 2010, New York lost population. So they lost 2 House seats, which means they lost 2 Electoral College votes. Florida gained population. So between 2000 and 2010, they gained about 1.5 million people. They got 2 House seats and then 2 more Electoral College votes because of that. Texas gained 4. Why are so many people moving to Texas? Because they're going to gain seats again between 2010 and 2020. Texas is going to, their population is growing rapidly. Does anybody know why? Is it because the weather's so great in Texas? Have you been to Texas? It's hot and humid. Okay? And the cities are huge. Dallas and Houston are huge cities. Why do people move? To get a what? Get a job. They have jobs down there, and there's no state income tax. Kansas has the 9th highest state income tax, the 50. Texas and Florida don't even have a state income tax. So if you're retiring and you have money saved for retirement, you want to live in a state that's a high tax state. Kansas is one of the worst states to live in as a retiree. Okay? we need to think about what we're doing at the state level, okay? Because we are not gaining population. People are leaving. What are you guys going to do when you get out of college? You guys going to stay? You're gone. How many of you guys were, any of you guys not born in Kansas? Where were you born?
Atlanta.
Atlanta? Okay. I wasn't born here. Most people don't move here. You know what I mean? Why would you move to Kansas? Right? Now Atlanta, depending on where you live in Atlanta, I lived in Atlanta for about 6 months. You live up north of the city, up in, what's the name of the big rock up there? Oh, you know, the big, why can't I remember it? Gwinnett County, Cobb County, those are pretty nice areas. Kennesaw, where you know where you lived in Atlanta?
Peachtree City.
Yeah, so that's a pretty nice area. Okay. But it's a big city. Holy cow. Georgia picked up 1 seat. Okay, look at these that lose seats. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio lost 2, Michigan lost, Iowa, Illinois, taxes are high in Illinois, and New York. Okay. And Louisiana is the only southern state to lose a seat. That was because of Hurricane Katrina. Okay, you guys remember hearing about Katrina? Okay. And basically New Orleans, a lot of it was underwater. And so a lot of people left the city of New Orleans and moved to places like Atlanta and Houston. All right. California, it's going to be interesting to see between 2010 and 2020 whether they will lose. They're not going to gain a seat, but they may lose a seat. Okay. Kansas, I just hope we keep our 6. Because we're not very relevant as it is, but if we drop the 5 electoral college votes, we're even less relevant. Okay. So we'll see what happens. Those numbers should be coming out soon. I hope they come out while we're in this class. Okay. So if you want to know how many members of the House a state has, all you do is look at that and subtract 2. What are the 2 added in? Your 2 what? 2 senators. Okay, so Kansas has 4 members of the House, 2 senators, we get 6 electoral college votes. Everybody with me? Now, how about this thing about doing away with the electoral college? Should we do away with it and become democratic? And just do the popular vote? Well, here's the thing. More than half the population of this country, about 60% of the population of this country, lives within 50 miles of the Atlantic coast, the Gulf of Mexico, the Great Lakes, or the Pacific. Okay, so if you're running for president and it's the popular vote, not the electoral college, where are you going to go campaign? Where the people are. You're going to go to the big cities. You're going to go to the coasts. Now, do people on the coasts tend to think differently than people in the middle and in the south? Okay, in order to win the presidency under the Electoral College, you have to have support, not just on the coasts. You have to get some support from the inner part of the country. Okay, so if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, and you're running for office and you're trying to win the election in a popular vote situation, my thinking is that you won't have any conservatives elected president ever again, because there's not enough votes out there. They're going to have to change their message to the people on the coast. Okay, so when you start talking about social issues like abortion, okay, people on the coast think a lot differently than people in the South and in the plains and the Midwest. Okay, so now obviously there's pro-life people everywhere and there's pro-choice people everywhere. generalizing. But under the Electoral College, states have a say. Okay? And if you take Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, all the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana, this deep south, and you put all those together, you start to build a coalition to get to 270 electoral college votes. Okay, if you add up the electoral college, okay, so I should just turn this on. You have 435 members of the House, right? 100 senators. That's 535 electoral college votes. Okay. As we'll learn, there are 3 electoral college votes for D.C., for the District of Columbia. Okay. So there's 538 electoral college votes. If you divide that in half, you get 269. In order to win the presidency, you need 270. That's the magic number. Okay. And if you look at the little maps underneath, and I know it's hard to see, you don't have good eyes, okay, you can see how the country is divided between red and blue, okay, and that's changing over time, okay. Some states used to be, solid red and they turned blue. Some states used to be solid blue and turned red over the 20th century, okay. Donald Trump did something that Republicans hadn't done in a long time, win Pennsylvania. Okay, and then Biden won Georgia, which Democrats had done before. Jimmy Carter was president; he was from Georgia, so he won Georgia a couple of times. But that was a big thing for Biden, who was winning Georgia. Arizona went blue for the first time in a long time. Okay, so the map does change. Okay, and it's really up to those candidates to work hard to get support in different parts of the country. You do away with the Electoral College, you lose that. Okay, now the winner of the popular vote has lost the Electoral College vote 4 times in American history. Okay, so some people say, well, that's not right. But guys, remember, what are these debates over? Why did they write it like this? They did this because the states were afraid to give up their power. Why were they afraid to give up their power? They were afraid to give up their power, ladies and gentlemen, because they didn't want a small group of people in Washington, D.C. making all the decisions for them. That's what this is about. So if you want to do away with the Electoral College, fine. But there will be consequences for that. Okay, does it make us more democratic? Yes. Do we live in a democracy? No. You won't hear that on the nightly news. Okay? But I'm a history teacher. Okay, so why? I mean, this is why we're doing this. Okay, so they set any questions over that, over the Electoral College. Shouldn't just jump and move on. Okay. Yesterday, the Supreme Court decided not to hear a case that was brought to them from the state of Pennsylvania about their election that took place in Pennsylvania. In order for the Supreme Court to hear a case, 4 of the 9 justices have to agree to take the case. Okay, and they did not have 4. So that case over election fraud or violation of election laws in Pennsylvania will not be heard by the Supreme Court. Okay, so that happened yesterday. So on September 17th, they've worked through all of these compromises, and most of the delegates will sign on to the Constitution. Okay, they're going to get their 9 of 13 to move forward. Okay, now remember, this guy was not there. Patrick Henry did not go to the convention because he was worried about giving too much power to the national government. And so he made a statement about this. He said, the Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It's an instrument for the people to restrain government, lest it come to dominate our lives and interests. Okay, this is important to remember. We talked about social contract theory. What is the Constitution is a contract between us and our government. Why did we write it? We wrote it so that we could live in a safe and secure country that was not tyrannical, that would secure our natural rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Okay, the Constitution was not written to restrain the people. Okay, we do that with our laws that we pass. Okay, the Constitution was written to restrain government, lest it come to dominate our lives and interests. Does that make sense to you guys? As a social contract, we pass laws to restrict our own liberties. The Constitution doesn't restrict our liberties. It restricts government's liberties. Okay? All right, so September 17th, guys, becomes known as Constitution Day. Okay? It's one of the days of the year that you should fly your flag. How many of you guys have a flag at your house? Okay. If you have a flag, there are certain days you're supposed to fly your flag. New Year's Day, Inauguration Day, January 20th. Lincoln's birthday, February 12th. Washington's birthday, the third Monday in February. His birthday was yesterday. His actual birthday. He was born in, my wife quizzed me on this last night, 1732. Washington. Easter Sunday, Mother's Day, Armed Forces Day, second Saturday in May, Memorial Day, of course, Flag Day, June 14th, Independence Day, July 4th, Labor Day, first Monday in September, Constitution Day, September 17th, Columbus Day, I don't know, that one might be going away, Navy Day, October 27th, Veterans Day, November 11th, Thanksgiving Day, the fourth Thursday in November, and Christmas Day. Those are the days you're supposed to fly your flag. Okay. All right, moving forward. In the fifth section here, got quite a bit to talk about. The battle didn't end here. So we got most of the delegates signed it. 9 states agreed to move forward with this new constitution, but the states have to ratify it. Okay? The states have a say still. I mean, it's just been the delegates to this point. But then they're going to have to vote within their states whether to accept this new constitution. Okay? And you've all heard of this, right? The Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Because we're creating a federal system of government which is going to grant the national government more power. Okay, so those in favor of the new Constitution were the Federalists, and those that were opposed to it were the Anti-Federalists. So these votes will be taking place in the state legislatures. Okay. So in the capitals of all these states. So some of the questions would include like, okay, is this giving too much power to the national government? Is this taking away too much power from the states? Is this constitution going to dominate the small states? Do the small states have enough protection? Okay. What's the president's role going to be? How much power is the president going to have? Will this government work? Will it restrain itself? And so forth. Okay. And there's going to be a lot of debate over this. Okay, because many states are deeply divided on this issue between Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Okay, kind of between your small government people and your big government people. Again, These are still issues that we have today, okay? So moving forward, obviously, let's look at the arguments of the anti-federalists first. And they make some really good points, okay? Ones that I think we should be thankful about, that they brought up these arguments, okay? Patrick Henry from Virginia, give me liberty, give me death, said this: the national government will become too powerful. Okay. It's now 2020, 250 years later. Was he right? It really depends on how you view things, right? I mean, that there's no right or wrong answer there, okay? For some, yeah, the federal government's too powerful. And for some, it's not powerful enough. Okay? So that's a debate that's still happening today. He said that popular government like this could only exist in small territories, that one this large would be held together by force. Now, do you guys feel like we're only being held together? We have 50 states now, sea to shining sea. We're a large country. We have 350 million people in this country, which is crazy, right? It's the third largest country in the world. Population-wise, are we only held together by force? I don't think that's the case. Yeah, I mean, now, if you don't pay your taxes, guys, the IRS can garnish your wages, you know, seize your property, that sort of thing. But generally, like, if you can't pay your debts, you don't go to jail. Okay. We have freedom of movement. I mean, if I want to go to Oklahoma this weekend, I don't have to ask anybody. I just hop in the car and go. You know what I mean? Are there a lot of regulations on starting a new business? Yeah. Okay. Is it a pain in the neck sometimes to go get your driver's license renewed? Yeah. There's things we could complain about. Okay. But yeah, I don't think we're held together by force. Okay. This question, I think some people would say, is definitely, you know, the national government's become too powerful. I think you'd find a considerable population that would believe that. Okay. But being held together by force, I don't think so at this point. Okay. Now, Patrick Henry says this. The anti-federalists say this. They say the strong executive, which is our president, would become too much like a monarch. I know people like to refer to Trump as an authoritarian. Okay, and that's one of your words, authoritarian. Okay. Biden has signed more executive orders in the first month of his presidency than any other president. Okay, and that's an executive directive coming from the president. It's not a law, it's a directive. Okay, is Biden acting like a monarch? Is Trump acting like a monarch, like a king? Have any of our presidents been like monarchs? You guys studied last semester, right? You studied FDR, right? That dude was elected 4 times. He was president for 13 years. Remember the New Deal? I don't know how much your teacher went into the New Deal, okay? But it really expanded the size and scope of government and control over people, or it tried. But I'd say even with FDR, who was probably the biggest big government president we ever had, you couldn't call him a monarch. I mean, sure, people criticized him, called him a dictator and stuff like that, but he truly wasn't. Now, if the president did that sort of thing, okay, we're going to have a debate soon. And, you know, I don't know what Biden's plans are exactly. I just hear, you know, stuff in the news and in the media about guns. Okay, so when you talk about guns, the Second Amendment stands in the way of guns being seized by government. Okay, if he tried to pass an executive order that said, you know, you have to register your gun with the government, something like that. That might frighten some people, okay? Because if the government, you know, you're allowed to own a gun, right? So if the government knows every person that has a gun, they know where to go get them when they want to take them away. If you have to register with the government. You follow me? Okay, this is what the Germans did. This is what the Nazis did. They want to disarm the population. It makes it easier to push them around. Okay, so that's where you start to run into, hey, this we need to be careful here. And there have been times, guys, when during World War II, remember what Roosevelt did to the Japanese Americans on the West Coast? You guys learn about that? Rounding them up and putting them in camps? Or during the Civil War, when Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and arrested people, detained them without charging them with a crime? Where were their Bill of Rights? Where were the Japanese Americans' rights? Because they were not charged with a crime, yet they were detained behind barbed wire without being convicted of a crime or even charged with a crime. Okay, so there have been times where our individual rights have been jeopardized. Usually that happens during a crisis. Okay? Now, what this government was lacking, this Constitution was lacking, was a Bill of Rights. So you guys know the first 10 amendments, right? Or the Bill of Rights. Everybody knows that, yes? So guys, the insistence by the anti-federalists to say, hey, you need to put it in writing what our rights are. That needs to be in black and white. That needs to be in the Constitution. We must be grateful to these anti-federalists for persisting, because they're going to win this argument. You understand? They're going to win, and therefore our rights are in black and white. They're in the Constitution, and they can't be taken away. All right? So we have to be grateful to these anti-federalists. They're not going to win a lot of the arguments. They're going to lose the overall argument, but they are going to get a Bill of Rights. Okay? And that's huge. All right, got a few more minutes here. Let's talk about the Federalists. I'm going to give you another assignment. I have two. I'll tell you about it in a second, okay? So the Federalists that wanted the new Constitution argued that the powers of the separate branches would check each other. So the executive, the president, would be checked by the legislative branch and by the judicial branch. So the president could not become like a monarch. And guys, that's the truth. It works. Our presidents have gained power over time, yes, but not through their own doing. They've gained power because Congress has allowed them to gain power. Okay? This way, no one branch will become too powerful. And that's worked. Okay? Now, this argument's going to fall on deaf ears. The Bill of Rights is not needed, they say. If you remember when we talked about the state constitutions, many of the state constitutions had a Bill of Rights in them. So the national powers are all listed. Those that not listed were guaranteed the states, and state constitutions provide for a Bill of Rights. Listen, this is what they're saying. Guys, the Constitution lays out all the powers the government has. And in this here, they don't say anywhere that the power has the right, that the government has the right to take away your rights. It doesn't say that in here. So what they're saying is that the national powers are listed. They don't have the power to take away your rights, so you don't have to worry about it. And by the way, the state constitutions have bills of rights in them, so we don't need one for the national government, for the U.S. Constitution. We want it in there. Okay, this argument is not good. Okay, now who's making that argument? James Madison's making that argument. Alexander Hamilton's making that argument. These are the Federalists. And this is John Jay over here. John Jay will become the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Now, why do I have these three men up here? Because they're going to write something. What are they going to write? Go. The Federalist Papers. That's right. The Federalist Papers. Okay? I'm just going to put this up here. You don't have to write it down. Do I not have yeah, they're the Federalist Papers. Okay? I'll pick up with this later. Okay? But yeah, these three men will write the Federalist Papers. Right here. Got a copy. Okay? So what they're going to do, and there's 85 essays here. 85 essays that explain that Constitution, okay, which is pretty cool. So look, if you look at this, here's the U.S. Constitution, okay? Here's the Federalist Papers. Okay, so Madison, Hamilton, and Jay, now Jay only writes 5 of the 85, okay? Madison and Hamilton write the rest. These are brilliant documents that really explain this to us. Okay? I don't know why this isn't mandatory reading for every high school student. Like, you should read this your freshman year of English. No, just kidding. But you guys are going to read 2 of them. I have chosen 2, okay? And I will post those as an assignment. There's like 3 questions for each one. And they're 2 of the most important ones. And then I'll take some time to talk about them in class. Now, I'm going to show a video Thursday and Friday. So I'll make this due Monday, Tuesday. Okay, you'll have plenty of time to do it. And then I'll take some time Monday and Tuesday to talk about it. Okay? We're going to do, I think it's 71, and I know definitely we're doing number 10 by Madison, which is a great literary work. Okay, now you're not reading the full document. I mean, Federalist number 10 is like 15 pages in here. You're going to read 1 page. Okay, so it's condensed. All right, I wouldn't do that to you. All right, so look forward to that, and relax on Friday for you guys. Watch video, okay? Come to class, enjoy that, and we'll get back after it on the notes on Monday. Okay, so you won't have a video to watch over the weekend. You'll just have a little assignment to do. Cool.